Hi, guys. My name is Tara, and I'm kind of an unusual girl. To be clear, I like pretty standard stuff movies, games, hanging out with friends. It's my body that's unusual. My arms and legs can bend at unimaginable angles, almost like something out of a comic book. It all started when I was a kid, around 6 years old, when my mother looked in on me in bed one night. She noticed that I was sleeping in really strange positions. At first, she didn't think it was anything important since all little kids are pretty flexible. When I turned 10, I decided to show her a trick. I showed that I could bend my arm in the opposite direction. I'm sure I did it because at that age I didn't understand that it wasn't normal. But my mother did, and the trick where, as far as she could tell, her daughter broke her arm right in front of her just horrified her. Mom immediately called an ambulance. The doctors were also sure I had a broken arm, but since they didn't find any wounds, they decided to send me in for a full examination to understand how I did something like that. After long and exhausting examinations, my mother and I were finally referred to a doctor. The doctor went over the notes and made his diagnosis. He said that I had joint hypermobility. Simply put, I was very, very flexible. And not just my arm, my whole body was like that. Let's be honest, this kind of condition isn't normal. So it's called a disorder and can cause pain. But I had a fairly simple form, and to my joy, I didn't experience any pain. The doctor also added that this flexibility might go away once I got older. By the time I turned 14, the elasticity in my body not only hadn't gone away, but had started to be even more noticeable. Mom, of course, didn't like it, but I did a lot. I always looked forward to PE at school so I could show off my special talent. In one class, the PE teacher asked me to do exercises. I began to flex my joints at different angles. My classmates tried to follow along. Then I did the trick that I showed my mom when I was a kid. The teacher saw how I bent my arm against its natural fold and how some of the other kids were already trying to copy my trick. She blew the whistle to stop them before they broke something. She came up to me and took me to the principal's office. My mother was also called to the principal. They told her that my academic performance was poor and that I also put the health of the other kids at risk. But I didn't ask anyone to copy me. Like any teenager, I just wanted to show what I could do. The principal and my mother decided that from now on, I wasn't allowed to show my talent at school. It was really hard for me. In my normal classes, I was bored and twiddling my thumbs, and in my favorite class, PE, I wasn't allowed to do anything at all. The teacher even let me be on my phone for the entire period just so I wouldn't bend my joints and show the other kids how I did the exercises. This made me feel pretty stressed, which is why I was always in a terrible mood. Although my mother agreed with the principal that I shouldn't show off my hypermobility at school, she could see how much I was suffering. She decided that a shopping trip would help cheer me up. Like a lot of teenage girls, shopping's something that relaxes me. As I walked through the mall, I noticed music playing. There were girls doing gymnastics up on a little stage. It looked like an advertisement for their gymnastics school. I froze in place and stared at their smooth, flexible movements with admiration. Mom already knew exactly what I was thinking. I wanted to become one of them, a student of the gymnastics school. She didn't try to stop me either. She knew it might make me happier and that I might finally stop looking so crabby all the time. After waiting for the show to finish up, I went over to their coach and found out how to join them. Also, I talked to the other girls, who were surprisingly pretty nice. The next day, after all my boring classes, I went straight to gymnastics school. I was sure that I would finally find my place there. It turned out that I was very wrong. The girls, who at first were friendly and told me, and most importantly showed me, all the difficult exercises they had mastered, suddenly started being really hostile. The fact is, while I had trouble with somersaults, if the coach or one of the girls showed me a pose or a stretch, I could easily repeat it no problem. These girls who had been doing gymnastics since they were kids spent hours stretching just to learn one pose. Me, I just needed to see it. Because of my natural talent and the fact that everything came so easily to me, everyone began to hate me. Everyone except the coach, who praised me. She seemed to have high hopes for me. However, her praise only made things worse. Now, on top of envying my talent, the girls were jealous of the attention she was giving me. In the next class, I was once again sitting on the sidelines, buried in my smartphone, just like in PE. I was afraid of making the other girls angry. I get why they were mad. Imagine, from the time you're a kid, you're brought to this gymnastics school 3 times a week and forced to sit in uncomfortable and even painful positions. And then when you're 14, I show up here and easily do everything that you worked so hard to learn over those long, agonizing years. In short, that's where I am. I was rough, and after the second lesson, I took all my things and never went back. Of course, this whole episode didn't exactly make me feel great. It was hard to live in a world where you're not like everybody else. Being unique only led to trouble and misfortune, so I had no choice but to keep living my life on autopilot. Eating, sitting through boring classes, doing homework, and sleeping, and so on, day after day. One day, when I was walking home from school, I saw a huge tent spread out in an old stadium, one that hadn't been used for a long time. Someone had rented it out. At first, I thought it must be a circus with trained animals. I hated those. I couldn't stand how cruel they were to the animals and the terrible conditions they kept them in. I was overcome by a wild desire to get into the tent and find out what was happening inside. I would take pictures and show them to the local authorities so they would shut the place down. I knew that entering someone else's property was illegal and that I could get punished, but I decided it was worth it to do the right thing. Also, to be honest, I wanted to do something to disrupt the boredom I'd been stuck in for so long. I was lucky and no one was guarding the stadium, but even so, I didn't dare go through the main entrance. I carefully walked around until I found a small gap in the wall that would let me get inside. First, I stuck my head through to see if anyone was there. I heard cheerful music and a lot of people's voices. Even though the gap was pretty small, I managed to squeeze through. My flexibility finally came in handy. I ducked behind a small railing and looked in at the arena in the center of the tent. I didn't see any exhausted animals, though, just professional circus performers. Clowns, a fire eater, a strong man. They were rehearsing for their next performance. I couldn't see very well from behind the railing, so I gathered my courage and climbed into one of the seats. The artists left the stage and others came out to replace them, beautiful girls in dazzling costumes. I immediately knew who they were. I'd seen similar costumes at the gymnastics school, although those were a lot less flashy. They were indeed gymnasts. Once on stage, they began to perform their act. The things they did were like nothing I'd ever seen. They knew more poses than they could possibly remember and bent as if they had no bones at all. I wanted to give them a round of applause, but I managed to catch myself just in time. If I hadn't, I would have been found and maybe even arrested. After the act ended, I decided to leave as soon as possible before they found me. I immediately ran home. Overcome with emotion, I locked myself in my room, turned on some music, and began to repeat what movements I remembered. I must admit, this time I couldn't do them on the first try. I had to try over and over until I got it right. And you know what? I liked the feeling that I could achieve something through training and hard work. It made each pose I managed to learn from the gymnasts that much more valuable to me, though there were some that I couldn't get right. The next day after school, I, even at the risk of being caught, went there again. This place seemed to draw me there somehow. It seemed magical in a way. I decided to go through my secret passage. After making sure that no one was waiting for me on the other side, I took a seat in the hall and settled in to watch the show. The rehearsal, as before, started with other artists. I couldn't wait to see the gymnasts. They were the ones I came to see. But this was not destined to happen. A beam from a searchlight suddenly fell on me. I didn't understand what had happened at first. I was confused. But then when I was about to run away, a voice came through a loudspeaker hanging on a pole asking me to get up on stage. Oh, now they were going to call the police, and then they would call my mom, and then they would tell the school, and then I'd be expelled for sure. But there was nowhere to go, and I had to obey. Almost all the artists I had seen were there on the stage. The strange thing was that even though I'd broken into their tent illegally, their faces weren't threatening, but actually pretty friendly. The presenter approached me. He was also, as I understood it, the director of the circus. He asked what I was doing here and if his competitors had sent me to steal their program. I said that I had just come to see the performance. The director thought about it. I expected him to call the police, but instead he asked me to show him what I could do. The look on my face let him know that I had no idea what he was talking about. The director said that he saw me yesterday and that only a very good gymnast could get through that little gap. And now everything was clear. They'd been waiting for me to show up. It was so awkward for me to show them anything, especially with them being pros. I asked for music to help me calm down somehow. Once I got into the right mindset, I was able to do the routine that I'd been practicing all evening the night before. There was a sudden round of applause, something I obviously wasn't expecting. The director told me that I had great talent and it would be a shame if I didn't develop it. He invited me first to study and then to perform with them in the circus. I never imagined something like this could ever happen. Even though it was only my second time there, for some reason, this place and these people felt like home to me. So I agreed right away. There was only one small hurdle left to tell my mother about it. So, my friends, what talents do you have? Tell your stories in the comments and subscribe to our channel. Bye.